Imagine standing on an endless sea of grass where the wind carries no city bells, only the thunder of thousands of horses. Somewhere beyond the horizon rides a man born with no kingdom, no palace, and almost no hope of survival. Yet within a single lifetime, his armies would forge the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known, connecting distant civilizations through conquest, commerce, and fear. Tonight, we follow the footsteps of that remarkable journey, not as a tale of legend, but as the unfolding story of real people, impossible ambition, and a world forever changed. Long before great walls divided kingdoms or mighty capitals dominated maps, the heart of Asia belonged to the open steppe. Here, survival depended not upon stone fortresses, but upon movement, endurance, and an intimate understanding of nature's rhythms. Families traveled with the seasons, following fresh pastures for their animals across landscapes that seemed without end. Children learned to ride almost as soon as they could walk, while every adult mastered skills that blurred the line between daily life and survival. It was a world where strength earned respect, alliances shifted like the wind, and the horizon always promised another journey. From these quiet grasslands, history was preparing an extraordinary transformation. The steppe was home to many tribes, each fiercely independent and bound together by kinship rather than permanent borders. Loyalty often belonged first to family, then to clan, and only afterward to wider alliances that could dissolve as quickly as they formed. Rivalries over grazing land, water, and honor frequently erupted into conflict. Yet these same struggles forged remarkable horsemen and resilient communities capable of enduring extraordinary hardship. Every season demanded adaptation, and every generation inherited lessons written not on parchment, but across the vast landscape itself. Among these competing tribes, a child would soon be born whose destiny would reach far beyond the endless horizon. Around the middle of the 12th century, a boy named Temüjin entered a world defined by uncertainty. Later generations would surround his birth with legend, but the reality was already remarkable enough. He was born into a respected family, though status offered little protection on the steppe, where fortune could disappear with astonishing speed. Above him stretched the same vast sky that guided countless nomads before his time, while beyond the campfires lay a landscape filled with rivals, opportunity, and danger. No one gathered that evening could have imagined that this quiet child would one day become known across continents as Genghis Khan. As Temüjin grew, his father introduced him to the responsibilities expected of a future leader. The lessons were practical rather than ceremonial: how to judge a horse, negotiate with neighboring clans, and recognize both friendship and betrayal. Leadership on the steppe demanded constant vigilance because trust could be as fragile as thin ice beneath spring sunlight. During one journey, that fragile balance shattered. Temüjin's father was poisoned after an encounter with rivals, leaving the young family suddenly vulnerable. The loss transformed childhood into survival almost overnight, setting into motion a chain of hardships that would shape one of history's most formidable leaders. With their protector gone, Temüjin's family found themselves abandoned by many who had once pledged loyalty. Stripped of influence and resources, they survived through relentless determination. They gathered wild plants, caught fish in icy streams, and endured winters that tested every ounce of their resilience. Hunger became a constant companion, yet hardship also taught lessons impossible to learn during times of comfort. Every decision carried consequences, Every relationship demanded careful judgment, and every sunrise offered another chance to endure. It was within these unforgiving years that the quiet resolve of a future empire began to take shape. Though the greatest trials still lay ahead, the years after his father's death were among the most difficult of Temüjin's life. Without the protection of a powerful clan, his family existed on the edge of survival. Yet these hardships created qualities that would later define his leadership. He learned that loyalty could not simply be inherited. It had to be earned. He understood the pain of abandonment and the importance of protecting those who depended on him. The harsh environment of the steppe became his greatest teacher, revealing that strength was not only found in weapons or armies, but in patience, adaptability, and the ability to endure when everything seemed lost. These lessons would remain with him long after his childhood ended. As Temüjin entered adulthood, survival alone was no longer enough. He needed allies, and he needed trust. On the steppe, where powerful clans competed for influence, a person's strength came not only from family ties, but from the people willing to stand beside them. Temüjin began gathering followers who believed in his abilities rather than his inherited status. He formed friendships with individuals from different backgrounds, creating bonds based on loyalty and shared purpose. This approach challenged traditional tribal structures, where birth often determined a person's place. Slowly, a new vision began forming, a society where ability and devotion could rise above old divisions. The rise of Temüjin was not achieved through a single victory, but through years of conflict, negotiation, and strategic decisions. He understood that defeating enemies was only part of creating lasting power. A conquered rival could become a future threat, or a valuable ally. Instead of destroying every defeated opponent, Temüjin often absorbed capable warriors into his growing forces. This changed the nature of steppe warfare. Loyalty was gradually shifting away from old family rivalries and toward a larger identity. Through victories and alliances, Temüjin transformed scattered groups of warriors into something far more organized. The foundation of a new political order was beginning to emerge across the grasslands. By the end of the 12th century, Temüjin had become more than a successful warrior. He was becoming a leader who could unite people around a common purpose. His organization introduced new structures that strengthened discipline among his followers. Advancement depended increasingly on loyalty and skill rather than simply noble ancestry. This created a powerful sense of unity among warriors who had once belonged to competing tribes. The steppe had long been a place of division, but Temüjin envisioned something different, a force that could move together with speed, discipline, and shared ambition. Soon, the scattered tribes of Mongolia would face a moment that would change their history forever. In 1206, after years of struggle and unification, Temüjin was recognized by the Mongol tribes with the title that would echo throughout history, Genghis Khan. The moment represented more than the rise of one individual. It marked the creation of a new political identity among people who had long been divided by tribal conflicts. Under his leadership, the Mongols became a united force capable of extraordinary movement and coordination. Yet the title was not the end of his journey. It was the beginning of an expansion that would carry Mongol armies beyond the familiar horizons of the steppe. Ahead waited kingdoms, empires, and civilizations that had never imagined the force approaching from the east. After uniting the Mongol tribes, Genghis Khan faced a new challenge. Unity had created strength, but strength required direction. The Mongols had become a disciplined military society, built around mobility, organization, and loyalty. Their way of warfare reflected the world that created them. They could travel enormous distances, survive in difficult environments, and strike with astonishing speed. But their ambitions extended beyond the familiar grasslands. To the south lay powerful kingdoms with wealthy cities, fertile lands, and resources that could transform the future of the Mongol people. The first great campaigns of the Mongol Empire were about to begin, carrying their riders into a wider world. The first major target of Genghis Khan's expansion was the powerful Jin dynasty in northern China. Unlike the nomadic societies of the steppe, China possessed enormous cities, advanced administration, and centuries of military experience. For the Mongols, these campaigns presented a new kind of challenge. They were no longer fighting only rival tribes. They were confronting one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the medieval world. At first, the walls of Chinese cities seemed to represent an impossible obstacle. Yet the Mongols adapted quickly, learning from engineers, prisoners, and captured specialists. Their ability to absorb new knowledge became one of their greatest advantages, allowing them to overcome challenges far beyond the battlefield. The Mongol conquests were often remembered only through the destruction left behind, but the reality was more complex. Their campaigns were brutal, and many cities suffered devastating losses. Yet the Mongols were also practical conquerors who understood the value of skilled people, knowledge, and technology. Artisans, engineers, scholars, and administrators were often spared and integrated into the expanding empire. The Mongols did not simply replace every society they encountered, they absorbed pieces of the worlds they conquered. This combination of military force and cultural adaptation allowed their influence to spread across enormous distances. As their armies moved farther west, they would encounter civilizations even more distant from the steppe homeland. Beyond China stretched another world, connected by the ancient trade networks of Central Asia. The Silk Road was not a single road, but a vast web of routes linking merchants, cultures, and empires. Controlling these pathways meant controlling the movement of wealth and information across continents. As Mongol forces expanded westward, they entered regions filled with powerful cities and ancient traditions. They encountered Persian kingdoms, Turkic peoples, and civilizations that had flourished for centuries. The empire that began among nomadic tribes was now becoming a bridge between east and west. But this expansion would also bring some of the most devastating conflicts of the medieval age. In the early 13th century, the Mongols came into conflict with the Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful state stretching across Central Asia and Persia. The confrontation began with diplomacy and trade, but quickly turned into one of the most significant campaigns of Genghis Khan's reign. A dispute involving Mongol merchants and diplomatic envoys escalated into open war. The response was swift and overwhelming. Mongol armies crossed vast distances with remarkable coordination, attacking major cities and breaking the power of a rival empire. The campaign revealed both the terrifying effectiveness of Mongol warfare and the harsh consequences faced by those who resisted. Yet even after these victories, the Mongol expansion was far from complete. The success of the Mongol armies was not created by numbers alone. Their greatest advantage came from organization, communication, and an extraordinary ability to move through difficult landscapes. Mongol soldiers carried their own supplies, relied on multiple horses for long journeys, and used advanced tactics that allowed smaller forces to defeat larger opponents. Their famous mounted archers could attack quickly, disappear, and return from unexpected directions. This style of warfare reflected centuries of adaptation on the steppe. The Mongols understood distance better than many of their enemies, and distance itself became a weapon. As their empire expanded, the world began to realize that no border seemed too far, and no kingdom seemed unreachable. The Mongol conquests brought both devastation and transformation. Cities that resisted faced terrible consequences, while those that submitted often became important centers within a growing imperial network. The Mongols understood that an empire required more than victories. It required administration. They adopted systems from the societies they conquered, employing local officials, scholars, and skilled workers. Their empire became a meeting place of different traditions, languages, and religions. Across its enormous territory, ideas traveled alongside armies and merchants. Technologies, artistic influences, and scientific knowledge moved between regions that had previously been separated by distance and conflict. The Mongol Empire was built through conquest, but it survived through connection. At the height of Mongol power, the empire created a level of connectivity rarely seen before. The vast territories controlled by different Mongol rulers formed a network stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. For merchants, travelers, and diplomats, this offered new opportunities to cross regions that had once been divided by constant warfare. The famous period, sometimes called the Pax Mongolica, encouraged trade and communication across Eurasia. Along these routes traveled more than luxury goods. Religions, inventions, medical knowledge, and stories moved between distant civilizations. The Mongols became the unexpected link between worlds that had spent centuries apart, reshaping the exchange of human knowledge across an entire continent. Conquering territory was only the beginning. Maintaining an empire of such enormous scale required communication, administration, and careful political balance. The Mongols developed systems that allowed messages to travel rapidly across vast distances. A network of mounted messengers carried orders between rulers, generals, and distant provinces. Their leaders also relied on councils where important decisions were debated among experienced advisors. Although the empire was born from warfare, its survival depended on organization and cooperation. The Mongols were not simply destroyers moving across the world. They were builders of a new political order that connected millions of people under a single imperial framework. Yet questions of succession would soon challenge this remarkable achievement. In 1227, after decades of conquest and transformation, Genghis Khan died during a military campaign against the Tangut state of Western Xia. The exact circumstances of his death remain uncertain, and his burial place has never been confirmed. What remained undeniable was the scale of what he had created. From a childhood marked by hardship, he had built an empire stretching across much of Asia. But the future of that empire now depended on those who followed him. The Mongol world faced a critical moment. Could the unity created by one extraordinary leader survive without him? The answer would determine whether the empire would fade or reach even greater heights. After the death of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire faced its greatest test, not on the battlefield, but within its own leadership. The empire had been built around the vision and authority of one man, yet its future required a system capable of surviving beyond him. According to Mongol tradition, important decisions regarding succession were made through a great assembly known as a Kurultai. In 1229, Genghis Khan's son, Ogedei, was chosen as the next Great Khan. His reign would continue the expansion of the empire while also strengthening its administration. Under Ogedei, the Mongols would move from being a powerful conquering force into a truly global empire. Under Ogedei's leadership, Mongol expansion continued beyond the lands conquered by Genghis Khan. One of the most dramatic campaigns carried Mongol armies into the western regions of Eurasia, where they encountered the kingdoms of Eastern Europe. Led by commanders such as Batu Khan and the brilliant general Subutai, Mongol forces demonstrated the same speed and tactical flexibility that had brought victories across Asia. In 1241, they defeated major European armies, including forces from Poland and Hungary. To many Europeans, the arrival of the Mongols seemed almost impossible to understand. A storm from the distant east, moving faster than any previous invasion they had witnessed. As the empire expanded, governing such a vast territory became increasingly complex. The descendants of Genghis Khan established several major branches, each ruling different regions of the empire. These included the Golden Horde in the west, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and later the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai Khan. Although these states shared Mongol heritage, their cultures and priorities gradually changed according to the lands they governed. The empire that once moved as a single force began to transform into a collection of powerful realms. Yet even divided, the influence of Mongol rule continued to reshape the civilizations under their control. Among the successors of the Mongol Empire, one of the most remarkable transformations occurred in China. Under Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, the Mongols established the Yuan dynasty and ruled over one of the world's most advanced civilizations. Kublai embraced many aspects of Chinese administration while maintaining Mongol traditions. His capital at Khanbalik, known today as Beijing, became a center of political power and international exchange. During this period, travelers from distant lands arrived at the Mongol court, describing a world of immense wealth and cultural diversity. The Mongol rulers of China represented a fascinating contradiction. Foreign conquerors who became guardians of one of history's oldest civilizations. The legacy of the Mongol Empire cannot be measured only by battles and conquered territories. Its greatest historical impact may have been the connections it created across continents. During the Mongol period, people, ideas, technologies, and traditions traveled with unprecedented movement. Chinese inventions reached Western regions, while artistic and scientific knowledge flowed in the opposite direction. Diplomats, merchants, and travelers crossed distances that had once seemed impossible. The empire opened pathways between civilizations that had rarely interacted so directly. Yet this interconnected world also carried unexpected consequences, as the same networks that spread prosperity would later help transmit one of history's most devastating disasters. The same networks that connected the Mongol world also carried forces beyond human control. During the 14th century, devastating outbreaks of plague spread across parts of Eurasia, moving through trade routes that linked distant populations. The relationship between the Mongol Empire and the spread of disease remains a subject of historical study, as the movement of people and goods created pathways for both cultural exchange and unintended consequences. At the same time, political divisions weakened Mongol states. Internal struggles, economic challenges, and changing local conditions slowly reduced the unity that had once connected the empire. The great force that had reshaped continents was entering a period of transformation. By the middle of the 14th century, the great Mongol political structure had changed dramatically. The separate khanates that emerged from the empire followed their own paths, influenced by local cultures, religions, and political challenges. In China, dissatisfaction with Yuan rule contributed to the rise of the Ming dynasty, which replaced Mongol authority in 1368. In Persia and Central Asia, new powers competed for influence. In the Western territories, the Golden Horde faced its own struggles. The empire that had once stretched across the largest continuous land area in history was no longer a single commanding force. Yet its influence remained deeply woven into the societies it had transformed. Centuries after the height of Mongol power, the memory of the empire continues to inspire fascination and debate. For some, the Mongols represent extraordinary military achievement, innovation, and global connection. For others, their name remains associated with the immense destruction caused during their conquests. Both realities exist within the historical record. The Mongol Empire was a force of contradictions, a civilization built through warfare that also encouraged trade, communication, and cultural exchange. Understanding the Mongols means looking beyond simple images of conquerors and recognizing the complex human story behind one of history's most remarkable transformations. The story of the Mongol Empire is ultimately a story about movement. People moved across borders, ideas crossed languages, and cultures met in ways that changed the course of history. From a small group of nomadic tribes emerged an empire that connected civilizations separated by thousands of miles. The Mongols changed warfare, influenced trade, and created one of the earliest examples of a truly interconnected world. Their rise reminds us that history is rarely shaped by one nation or one moment. It is shaped by encounters between people, landscapes, ambitions, and choices. Across the silent grasslands where their journey began, the echoes of that transformation still remain. The Mongol Empire rose from a world of hardship and uncertainty, carried forward by ambition, discipline, and the extraordinary vision of its leaders. It conquered vast territories, changed the balance of power between civilizations, and created connections that would influence the world for generations. Yet, like all empires, its power eventually faded. Cities changed hands, dynasties disappeared, and armies turned into memories. What remained was a legacy written across continents. A reminder of how quickly the course of history can change when determined people move beyond the boundaries of their own world. Beneath the endless sky of Mongolia, the story of the empire lives on, carried forever by the wind.